My name is Sarah Connelly and I'm one of the coaches in the Alcohol-Free Lifestyle program. I've just finished work on a Wednesday night. I'm definitely not drinking tonight. I've made sure of that. There's no cold wine in the fridge or beer, and I don't have any mixers, so I'm definitely not drinking tonight. In this episode, I'm going to share with you how I managed to conquer the inner voice, the inner saboteur that kept me going back to drinking, even when I was determined not to. So here's the story. Here I am, home on a Wednesday evening, knowing that I'm not drinking tonight, and yet the voices start. Well, you said that you would only drink on the weekends, but it's Wednesday, and you know that every time you start drinking on Thursday, because Thursday's almost the weekend. So what's the difference if you have a drink tonight? We're almost there. I sit back, frustrated. When is this voice going to leave me alone? It pipes up again. Come on, you need it. You deserve it. You've worked really hard today. There's no harm in it. It doesn't matter. Besides, your husband's not here. He'll never know. You can always brush your teeth so that he can't smell it on you. Oh, this is when that voice starts to get very, very sneaky. Why does this voice not leave me alone? I'm so determined. I'm so want to not drink tonight. That's all. Just tonight. There it is again. Sarah, come on. You're getting yourself all worked up. You need to have a drink. It's going to be fine. Just have one. I tell you what, let's get some ice cubes, get a bottle of wine. You can pour one glass with some ice cubes. Don't put the wine in the fridge, just put it away. Just have the one glass. I feel my resolve start to wane. And at this point, I can almost taste the cool, crisp liquid. I can almost feel in my body the immediate sensation of the alcohol hitting my bloodstream. And with it, the peace, the calm, the relaxation that I crave. Once I reach this point and my body starts to get involved, I know that it's only a matter of time before I go and get that glass of wine. I wasn't able to observe this process when I was in it. It was more like a really quick series of internal conversations and then straight to the fridge and having a glass of wine. But the reality was that it was never just one glass of wine. Once the alcohol got into me, it fired up my internal reward systems in my brain that were so used to having more than one that the cravings were impossible to ignore. I'd slowly sip mindfully like they told me in all the books. My glass of wine, I'd be conscious, I'd be paying attention, but by the end of that first glass, all rational thinking was out the window. I would watch myself go back, find the warm bottle of wine, get some more ice cubes, pour another glass, and I would allow myself to let go. For maybe 45 minutes, I felt peaceful and calm and relaxed. I had scratched the itch and I was enjoying the benefits. Over the course of the evening, once I'd finished that first bottle, the anxiety started to kick in because I did have some limits. There was no way I was going to open another bottle. So I would spend the rest of my evening feeling anxious, jittery, irritable. My kids would come home. I had zero interest in engaging with them, not because I don't love them, but because my mind was so preoccupied with the idea of having more to drink. This is the stage where control, willpower, whatever you want to call it, goes out the window. And if we do have some sense of internal willpower or resolve still hanging in there, It's hard work. It's exhausting. Looking back, I can see now the whole process with crystal clear clarity. There's nothing there that has to do with my lack of willpower, my lack of intention, my lack of desire to quit, my knowledge that what I was doing was bad for me. All of those things were still there. But once you fire up the body systems that have been conditioned to crave alcohol, it is almost impossible for you to say no. I imagine that some of you listening to this will recognize this story in your own life. Maybe you've overcome it, maybe you're still there. The way that I dealt with it over time was, in the first instance, paying attention. I'd tried to quit many times in the past, but I just stopped. I just said, right, I'm stopping. I hadn't really investigated what was going on. I just knew it was bad, so I stopped. And I was very good at that. I stopped for a month, I stopped for 2 months, stopped for 2.5 months. But at the end of those periods of not drinking, I would get to my final day and it would be game on. I'd proven to myself that I didn't need to drink. And that proof and that evidence would carry me for quite some time. I would start out by just having 1 or 2, telling myself that I was completely in control. And then slowly but surely, my reward systems, which had been damaged through excessive drinking in the past, just kept demanding more. The effect that they were looking for was not being met by 1 or 2 glasses of wine. After the successful attempts at quitting, I would end up 2-3 months down the track, drinking the same amount, if not possibly more. And added to that was another insidious voice that kicked in. You will never, ever be able to stop doing this. You are weak. You are pathetic. Something is wrong with you. When are you going to sort yourself out? This voice is the one that I needed to address. The judging, the criticism, the vitriol that would come from inside my head towards me, against me, for something that was not my fault. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know any of this. But now, as I observe people attempting to quit alcohol, I see there are 2 distinct camps. There is the type of person who, in the early days like me, thinks it's simply a matter of not putting a drink to your lips, getting on with your life and pretending like nothing's wrong. And for some, that may work, but it didn't work for me. I needed to understand what was going on. And the reason I needed to understand it was because I was so tired of judging myself for it. I couldn't believe that somebody with a relatively decent amount of intelligence, who was running a successful company, raising kids, running a house, doing all the things, couldn't just stop drinking. What on earth was going on? I'd done all sorts of things in my life. I'd become a yoga teacher, taught and studied mindfulness, had a counselling diploma, done heaps of personal development work. And this was the thing. This was the one thing that I just couldn't seem to get a hold of and I didn't understand. It wasn't until after I decided to quit for good. I needed some education and I needed some support. This was nearly 4 years ago, and I went into a 2-week inpatient rehab. Every day they held lectures about different things related to addiction. I wasn't just alcohol, they had people there for drugs and other behavioural addictions. I went to every single lecture with an open mind, with a desire to learn and understand more about myself and what it was about me that felt the need to drink as much as I did. I threw myself into the worksheets and the discussions, and in the course of 2 weeks realised one key thing that made all the difference for me. And the difference was the question, what value does alcohol bring to you in your life? So I was in the second camp, type of person that really needed to get to the root. I knew that if I didn't do that, that critical inner voice would just keep on coming back over and over again. I was looking for evidence that would help me in those internal negotiations with that inner critic that I just couldn't seem to manage on my own. I needed more data. I needed to learn more about myself and more about alcohol so that when I got into those debates about whether or not I should have a drink, I had more information, more knowledge, more intelligence about what was going on. Getting all this information, and I'm still learning, has taken time. But for the purposes of this episode, I want to share with you the one thing that really helped me. And that was the question, what value is alcohol bringing to your life? On the surface, yes, it was bringing a lot of value. It was bringing the value of escapism and peace and quiet and switching off. But values are long-term things. Values are not short-term gratification. And so I started to really focus on what I valued most in my life. And as I identified those things, I realized that whilst alcohol was actually giving me all of those three things, it was giving them to me in a short-term solution. I value peace of mind. I value self-respect, and I value adventure. The peace of mind would come just briefly with a few glasses of wine. I'm not so sure about the self-respect, so I might have to put that one to one side. But the adventure, the excitement, that was a big part of why I was drinking. I wanted to change how I felt. I was bored. My life was a little bit mundane. I didn't have anything exciting in my life at the time. And so drinking was my way of changing how I felt. But the reality was, when I got really honest, was that I was changing how I felt about myself in a negative way. Every time I drank, I was feeding that inner voice, feeding it with more data that could chip away at my self-respect and at my peace of mind. So if you recognize that you have this inner voice that just keeps pushing you to drink, it keeps encouraging you, rationalizing, making excuses. The good news is that you are seeing it. And in order to change, we have to be able to see the thing that we're trying to change. So firstly, be comforted that you've recognized this part of yourself. And once you recognize it, you can start to ask more intelligent questions rather than telling it to go away or trying to get it to shut up, which is highly unlikely because it's very, very persistent. See if you can start asking questions like, I'm interested in what value you believe we're going to get from this long term. I'm intrigued as to what it is that you really need in this moment. Is it actually the alcohol, or is it just some peace? In which case, are there better ways that we can find that together? The biggest shift after checking out what value am I actually getting out from alcohol was in the way that I interacted with this inner voice. Instead of trying to shut it down or block it out, I started to listen because it really did have a few things to say. And when I really started to listen and stop resisting, we managed to have a more productive conversation.
James here, pardon the interruption. I just wanted to share some of the results that many of our Project 90 clients have been generating in their life because of not drinking alcohol for at least 90 days. Indapal Johal from California says, I'm having more fun alcohol-free. Victoria from Colorado says, I'm feeling so much happier and positive. Craig from Washington says, I feel more freedom. And John from New York says, I'm feeling so much happier. If you'd like to get your self-confidence back, if you'd like to have more joy joy, more peace, more happiness in your life, and you are ready and willing to get outside professional support to get off the stop-start cycle with your drinking, join a like-minded community, and finally nip this drinking issue in the bud, then I invite you to go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90, read through, watch through all the details, and if it feels in alignment, then you can schedule a 15-minute exploratory call with one of our coaches. You can go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90, and the link is in the show notes. Let's get back to the episode.
So the conversation turned. What value am I getting out of alcohol? The inner voice, the inner critic, started with a whole host of reasons why I should keep drinking. But because I couldn't drink, I couldn't scratch the itch. And the voice eventually had to calm itself down. What value are you getting from drinking alcohol? Over the time that I spent in this clinic, my inner voice started to become a bit more compliant with the understanding that alcohol really did not add any value to my life. All the things that I thought it brought to me were outweighed by all of the negative effects over time. These fleeting moments of numbness and escapism that I felt I couldn't live without became moments that I had to sit and look inside and ask myself some hard questions. The value that alcohol was bringing to my life became purely a shortcut to inner peace. That was what I was trying to find. I realized very quickly that when I couldn't put alcohol in my body, I realized the only way I was actually going to get what I wanted was by stopping drinking, by not taking the shortcut, because the shortcut did not work. And in fact, over time, that shortcut became more and more painful and lasted less and less time. So myself and my inner voice started to have more productive conversations. Yes, it would often pipe up in the months after I left the rehab and say, look, you're on your own here. Nobody else is doing what you're doing. Everybody else is drinking and they're all fine. You'll be fine. Have another drink. But something had changed inside me. The value of alcohol had completely gone. The reason that I think that it went so quickly was because I realized that while I was drinking, I had had a deep sense of incongruence, a deep feeling that I hadn't explored, which was this habit, this destructive habit, does not align with my deepest values. How can I keep doing this? How can I keep doing something that is so contrary to my own deep inner voice? The one that I've learned to listen to more and more often now. So the purpose of sharing this with you guys on this podcast is firstly so that you can recognize that if you have this inner debate, this inner negotiation going on, firstly, it's completely normal. We all have it, not just about alcohol, about everything. That inner voice will tell you one thing and change its mind, and then it will tell you another thing. It will tell you you're amazing, and then it will tell you you're not good enough. It will tell you to drink, and then the next morning it will tell you you're weak and pathetic for doing it. There is one deep inner voice that doesn't get involved in these conversations. This is the one we want to tap into. The inner critic is driven by fear. Fear of change, fear of facing up to reality, fear of potentially stepping up and reaching your true potential. This inner voice needs to be spoken with gently, kindly, and calmly without the influence of alcohol, and not just for a couple of weeks. It takes time to understand that your habit of alcohol is a result of a long period of time of changing some of the key neural structures and neural pathways in your brain. When it reaches the stage where your inner voice is so persistent, it is due to the fact that the cravings that have been created by this habit are too strong for it to resist. This is where the other voice needs to intervene. This is where the deeper voice, the one that knows, the one that watches, needs to step up, needs to be called in. What value is alcohol really bringing to my life? There may be a tendency here for us to become angry and frustrated about alcohol, and I think this is a stage that we all need to go through. But ultimately, can we just look at alcohol as an object, something that's out there, like a car or a house? And if we don't value it, we won't think about it. If we don't value it on a positive way, we will think about it potentially in a negative way. So what if we can think about alcohol in a neutral way? It's just something out there in the universe that you can take or not take, and it doesn't bother you. If we fill ourselves with anger and hatred and despair, there is always a repercussion for that. We are still attached in some way to alcohol. If we try and fight this voice with anger, fear, frustration, it purely makes it feel worse and therefore much more likely to want to go and grab a drink. So this is the point at which I realised that I needed to intervene. I needed to have a conversation with this part of myself that was so afraid and so addicted. The conversation went along the lines of, let's take a look at the value that we're getting here. Yes, acknowledge that there will be a moment where we feel better. There will be a short period of time where the alcohol will do what we want it to do. But after that, what value is there in me consuming this substance? This was a very interesting process and one that I highly recommend, because when you really start to learn how to negotiate in a positive way with this inner voice, you can begin to feel more integrated and more connected with yourself, so that your responses to life, to the stresses and all the triggers that come up, is more considered. The inner critical voice is fueled by alcohol. It is fueled by depression and anxiety. Somebody somewhere has to come in and try and soothe it and calm it down so that it doesn't go into autopilot reactive mode. And that person is you. You have the ability to work with this inner voice. You have the ability to step in and calm it down. In short, don't fight this inner voice. Listen to it, have an intelligent conversation with it, and work out what it is that it really needs. I found that the more kind and compassionate I was towards this voice, towards myself, the easier it became in those moments where the cravings were strong and the desire to drink was almost overwhelming. I was able to stop and step back and just ask these questions. What value will I really get? What value will we get from drinking? Is it worth it? Will you feel better afterwards? And I found that over time, this inner critic started to settle down, that started to be open and curious about what was going on. And that slowed the reactivity and the impulsivity. What it does is it creates a pause between when things fire up in your system and when you actually take action. Everybody has the capacity to do this, but it must come from a place of compassion and understanding. As I mentioned earlier, part of that came from really appreciating, understanding and accepting that an alcohol use disorder is no one's fault. There are a multitude of factors that come into play, but it is our responsibility. And if we can get really clear on what value we are getting out of alcohol, we can start to have a more productive internal dialogue about how we can get the same values, but in healthier, more sustainable, fulfilling ways.
James Swanwick here again. Thank you so much for listening to the show. I want to send you some free stuff. If you haven't yet got the Alcohol Freedom Formula, then you can get that at alcoholfreelifestyle.com/guide. The YouTube channel is alcoholfreelifestyle.com/YouTube. I put out lots of educational videos on my Instagram page at James Swanwick. You can also find me on TikTok at James Swanwick. If this show has benefited you, I would so appreciate you leaving a review and giving it 5 stars. We have a 5-day no alcohol challenge, a 30-day no alcohol challenge. You can get details over at alcoholfreelifestyle.com. And if you would like to apply to be part of Project 90, which is our flagship process where you get a community, 7 coaching calls per week are available to you, a like-minded community, mostly folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, then you are welcome to apply. You can get all the details over at alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90, and the details are in the show notes. Thank you again for listening. I will catch you on the next one.